My name is Levi Domingo. I'm the product of a sacred Jew. My father, that was passed, was a judge, and my mother was originally from Izmir, from Turkey. I'm descendant of a family that once had to go away in the 17th century to Istanbul, and afterward, as my family dealt with metals and jewels, they moved to Izmir in Turkey. But we had always the desire to come back to the place where we started, and this is why my grandfather came here in the end of the 19th century, and he brought the keys, because we have the habit when we left, we brought our keys, hoping to come back to our houses. This is kept and was transferred from the older of the family, the father to father, from the grandfather to the grandson, etc. And I have my keys at home. Part of my family is from the northern east of Portugal, from the district of Bragança and down the river Douro Valley. And the part of my mother, originally were from the region of Coimbra, where they live. What we have here, we preserved all our traditions at home without being seen outside, far from the eyes of the others. I can tell you that you are stepping now a region that I consider the highlight of the Judaism in Portugal, because we preserved, without books, without nothing, all the memories and all the praise, all the rites and the festivities, etc., that were transmitted to generation after generation by our grandmothers and our mothers, without books, in Portuguese, because in that time, in the past, if someone in the time of the Inquisition, just a simple word, shalom, was enough to be accused. Every morning we have a prayer that we ask Hashem to protect us against persecutions and inquisitions. Surely that our neighbors knew who was the Jew or who is the Jew, because the places were too small. Even I'm not from Belmonte, I'm from Guarda, but my neighbors were pointing us as a Jew. But we are the Jews that we learned to be since we were kids. We had instructions not to say nothing outside. Sure, we were kids, but we never said nothing that would happen at home. This is why now in Belmonte, in my opinion, the most emblematic community that we have in Portugal, because it's constituted only by Portuguese people, local Portuguese people. And this is an example how these things were transmitted along the generations. We are only completely free after the democratic revolution that happened in Portugal in April 25, 1974. Before, nothing spoke, or very few or nothing, almost nothing spoke about Inquisition or the Holocaust. Now it's taught at school. The kids know what happened, and we are proud. Portugal, fortunately, Baruch Hashem, we have no anti-Semitism. You can be with your kippah, with your Magen David, to say I'm from Israel or from Jew somewhere. No one bores you. Do you know that since the very early times of Portugal, when the first kings conquered these places to the Moors, they met Jewish communities. They asked the Jews that were in the Taifs, that were in crisis in the Arab places, maybe in the south, in the Cordoba or Granada or other place, El Andalus. They were asked to give life, economical and social life, to the place that were conquered to the Moors. So, this is why we have a lot of places, mainly in this region of the northern part, and closely with the border of Spain, that they have a lot of documents and records about the Jews that lived there since the very early times of Portugal. So sometimes people think that the Jews lived in Portugal only after the expulsion of Spain. But not only, we speak only about one expulsion, but we had another one in 1391. You see that in that part, they established around this border that we are now here in this region of Belmonte and Guarda and Troncoso and Monsanto, etc. Some of activities that we still have came from that time, and after from the second expulsion, big one, perhaps the biggest one in 1492 from Spain, from Castilla and Leon. They introduced here a lot of activities. They were supported by the Jews, like the textile and the industry of the wool. in Covilhã, not far from here. Even we still have Jewish families or descent of Jewish families that have the factories there, and now they have other activities. In Gouveia, or in Ceia, or in Guarda, or in Vila Verde. Do you know in Vila Verde we have a museum of leather that came from the Bnei Anusim, the Jewish times. We supported these kind of things. The part of my mother have some instruments that came from the other side of the Mediterranean Sea, from Turkey. But the part of my father had nothing. Well, the only thing that I had were the candles. The candles that were handmade and we used to light on Shabbat and Hanukkah, or someone died. Nothing. If I want to make a real museum about the Bnei Anusim, or the secret Jews in Portugal, I don't know if I had many things, because everything was destroyed or hidden at home, or in the cases, do you know these candles were hidden inside the cases that, in this case, were inside the walls that sometimes we cover with a curtain, and we cover with a piece of furniture. If you enter there, didn't see nothing. But we did it, and women prayed and teach all the praise to the kids and mainly to the daughters, and it's an encyclopedia that we have alive. We used to go to the river to beat 12 times with a branch of olive trees that represent the opening of the Red Sea, and each time represents in this region, in the northern part, and even here, the tribes of Israel went across. Or we make the matzot at home. We clean all the ferment or the chametz, and before 18 minutes in the roof tiles, in the vegetable sharpen with the fireplace, we used to put a small piece of the mass, and when it opens and say Hallelujah to Hashem, and we start to make the matzah.
You remember it as a kid?
I remember very well. Now we get it from Israel, but in that time when I was a kid, I was young, I remember very well. And sometimes we do it not at home, not because only to take to preserve the tradition, but not in the first day, in the third day, because sometimes Easter of the Christians and Pesach of ours was in the same time, so we had to separate, because our neighbors knew. You know, when we put our candles nearby the windows sometimes for the Hanukkah or in Shabbat, yes, they used to, what for? It is to give light to the souls, not for the festivities. So we had to elude, like Rambam said, to preserve the life that is the big miracle that we have from Hashem, do it. And if he did it too. So we do it. Without books, without nothing.
You grew up remembering this, and it was hidden inside your home. But did you have other friends near you that were also, and you spoke? I was 16 in Guarda. We created with Celso and António José Mourão, that is from Belmonte, a Jewish group that we used to meet at my home or the home of them. And we had our activities closely, because in that time was not permitted. In the time of the dictator, to be Jew was to the one that killed Christ. They pointed us. I remember when the professor met Dr. Evaristo, told to me and to Mourão and to the other, to Batista, and he said, you go out because this place is not for Jews. I remember, I was 14. I remember very well in the grammar school in Guarda. If you ask someone in Belmonte, for instance, if you ask here or in Trancoso or somewhere, or in Pinhel, or in Mogador, or in Lagoaça, who are the Jews, they point here. They point where there are the houses. Everyone knew was who. So we grew up like this. Everyone knew what we were.
But besides the fact that they were saying Jews, was there any hostility?
No, except in Easter. They were blaming us to be the responsible to kill their Messiah. Do you know that during the dictator, we were obliged to belong, since we were entering the grammar school, mainly to an organization that was the Portuguese youth. This Portuguese youth was inspired in the Nazist youth. You know that we have an uniform green shirt with the Brazil of Portugal, with strong boots, and brown pants, and the belt with S that means Salazar, and with a Kiko, as we say. And we have to swear to our flag of Portugal. Do you know how we did it? Stand up, very close like the military, and stand up like the Nazis. Was like this. If we did it till 1974, April 25. Look, 43 years ago.
And what happened then?
Then we had democratic revolution. Freedom came to us for the religions because we had in the dictator the Concordata. Concordata was an accord between the state and Vatican. It still exists, but now completely different. But we have the Concordata that obliges us to be Christian by force. It was another kind of another kind of inquisition. Also, I must tell you that all the things were built by the church. Everything we were obliged to obey, to go to the Christian classes. Do you know, if I miss 3 classes, I missed the year. I missed 4 times. But I had to be transferred to a particular college, and after I went back to, it was like a yo-yo to go and to come. But we were obliged to go to the Christian classes. But since we were kids, till we left the grammar school. I remember very well these episodes. They were not so easy to support them. In that time, I remember that when I went to grammar school, to the classes of religion and moral, I remember that the priests there, because we were obliged to go there, they spoke a lot about against the Jews. Now the things are completely different. After this democratic revolution, we had freedom, and Judaism in Portugal is rising up. We have a lot of Bnei Anusim. So I cannot say a number, but we have a lot. Sometimes people asked us to come back and to relearn what they lost. We have groups in the north, here, they are relearning what they lost during the centuries. And some, because by the Rabbanut it's necessary to have a giur. Some of them, they got the giur and they made aliyah to Israel, they immigrated to Israel. This is why some communities like Belmont are becoming smaller. The question, what is going in the future? I think that those Bnei Anusim could replace, we have cases here, replace those that are making aliyah to Israel. We still have minyan in the synagogue. We celebrate weddings, Brit Milah, Bar Mitzvah, etc. We have all the things. And even we have kids that know how to read Hebrew, and when the rabbi is not here, they lead the service in the synagogue. Besides this, it's with a big joy that I see that the authorities, the local authorities, are engaged to preserve the Jewish traditions and the Jewish marks and the Jewish quarters. We have 32 cities and towns that have Jewish quarters, main houses here, they have a network of the Jewish quarters, and they are preserving and created the Jewish centers and memorials dedicated. You know, just a week ago, inaugurated by our President of our Republic, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, in the border in Vila Formosa was inaugurated a museum or a center of interpretation that was dedicated to Aristide Sousa Mendes. Aristide Sousa Mendes was the consul of Portugal in Bordeaux in France. There during the Second World War saved 30,000 people, perhaps more than 90% Jews. And they entered here, not far from here, in Vila Formosa, in the border. Disobeying the orders of the dictator, Salazar, he gave the visas, and these visas were used to cross Spain. And the Jews were not allowed to stay here in Portugal, because the government in that time said that they must go to some place like Figueira da Foz, not far from Coimbra, near the sea, Cascais or Estoril near Lisbon, and small places, only in transit. You remember the film Casablanca. So, but some families remained here. But this is a big example that is important, exactly in the place where the trains came from France and stopped, except the train. The train of Luxembourg, the third train, was not allowed to enter in Portugal. And they went back to Luxembourg or to Belgium or to France, and people were, after they succeeded to reach freedom or to go run away, that they were deported to the camps. So Portugal now is why we are preserving the Jewish heritage. And one thing that is impressive, the population, the general population, helps to preserve the Jewish heritage. We made a study in the region of Serra da Estrela, the other part of the mountain, in the highest mountain of Portugal, and we discovered more than 500 symbols and marks and inscriptions dedicated to the Ansim. I went to Alvoco da Serra, is a small village, in the time was a town, a small town. Even the houses of the Ansim have the name of those that lived there in that time. After we saw the population, when we went back to the places, the population were asking for the marks and slavim, the crosses, because the crosses have double meaning. For the Christians, you have the cross, and sometimes you have a circle, and you have this. In our tradition, the crosses is, suppose it's a cross. In the extreme of the cross, you have points. That means Yud, 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 means Shaddai, and sometimes you have the shin upside down here, and we have the circle that means Hashem, in Sof. So, but this is our tradition. It's across the centuries. I knew it even in Spain. They have near the border they have the same tradition, and because the mezuzot were not allowed. And one thing that perhaps you don't know, we had a pocket mezuzah. In the past, the mezuzahs were not allowed. One of them is in the museum here, in the Jewish Museum in Belmont, belonged to my family. And it comes from the 16th century. So we had a pocket mezuzah. It's like an amulet, a protection, but suppose we don't enter, we enter in a house that there was no mezuzah. So we were touching the mezuzah in the pocket. And this here. So we had to elude everything. We had two names. We had two names, to name inside and outside. I remember when I was a kid, the people, hey, what's your name, inside or outside? So, we have an example. Fernando Cardoso was a doctor that was born in Trancoso in 1603. And Fernando Cardoso went with the family to Salamanca and Valladolid, was graduated in that time in philosophy and medicine. And was a very, very famous doctor. An episode of the killing of the Portuguese Jewish Ansim that lived in Calle de las Infantas in Madrid, the street of Las Infantas in Madrid. After this, he moved to Livorno in Italy, where he took the Jewish name that he had, Isaac. So, see, Fernando Cardoso, but he was Isaac Cardoso. And he took the Jewish identity in Italy. He died in Verona, where he was a doctor. And he wrote an important book, The Excellencies of the Hebrews, that is considered one of the most important books of the 17th century, published in Amsterdam in 1679. And this book was the object of another book that the professor in Israel, the professor Israel Yerushalmi, Yosef Israel Yerushalmi, wrote from the court of Spain to the Italian ghetto, where he shows that much more free in the ghetto than in the court of Spain. So you see, he had Fernando, but he took the name Isaac. And his brother was Miguel Cardoso, but in fact was Avram Cardoso. As I told you, after the democratic revolution, freedom came. Portugal was the very first place that the government gave the citizenship to those that proved that are descendants of the Jews from Sfaradim, from Portugal and some from Spain. After the revolution, appeared some swastika, but it was the kids, was the time that the Jews were not well seen even by the communists and by the others, so it was a very complicated time, but no, we don't have.
Do you know of hidden Jews
I know.
that are still remaining Christian because it's comfortable, practicing still.
I know some Jews or Anusim, they have the double identity. I mean, they have the Jewish festivities at home, but they go to the church. Look, they do it. But if you ask them, are you Jew? I'm Jew. They consider, I'm Jew. They answer immediately, I'm Jew.
But if you ask them...
But it was to be comfortable and not to sometimes, because mainly in these regions of the interior, we have still the pressure of the church, of the priests, etc. The young people don't care. But the others, they see the set pressure because they are the Jews. And if you go, sometimes you go to the church, not only it's not to pray, it's to be shown. To show I'm here. But after they came at home and they light the candles and they do everything, I can tell you, we still have secret Jews. Not because they fear, but because it's a very young thing, very intimate thing, not to be shared. You can ask them, are you Jew? Oh, perhaps tomorrow it's going to rain. Oh, yes, the market was good. So they changed immediately the conversation.
But do they tell their children?
They tell, everyone tells. Captain Basto was born in a place named Amarante, and he created the Jewish work of the Reunification that wanted to bring back the Jews openly to Judaism in the time of the dictator. And he crossed all this region, including here in Belmont, to contact the Jewish hidden Jews. Even he published a book about it. And he created a lot of synagogues. And one of the synagogues was here and another in Covilhã. But these synagogues were closed because he was expelled of the army, was rehabilitated only 7 years ago. But one of the synagogues was in Covilhã, not far from here. Some months ago appeared hidden Sefer Torah. So was one that was offered to the synagogue by Joaquim Sebag from Morocco, that came to Porto, and from Porto came to this. Now the Sefer Torah is kept by the municipality. Was hidden inside the wall. Was here a few months ago. You know, we have places in Portugal that if you speak about them, they immediately identify like places of the Jews. I speak about Guarda, Trancoso, Belmonte, Foscoa, Vila Cova Colheira, Castro Daire was the place of Isaac Abba Fonseca, the first rabbi of all America, was born there. Ceia, Vila Verde, Monsanto, Penamacor, Castelo de Vide, Castelo Branco. Castelo Branco was the hometown of Luna de Montalto, that was a doctor of Catherine de Medici. Serpa, Beja, Évora, Estremoz, Faro, Coimbra, Lausanne, Lamego, Bragança, Miranda do Douro, Chacim, Mogadouro, Freixo Espada à Cinta, Moncorvo, Carrazeda de Anciães, Moimenta da Beira, Vila Cova Coalheira in the region of Serra da Estrela, Viseu, Lourosa de Besteiros, where they rebuilt the synagogue now, Joeus, near Tondela, etc. We have a lot. São João de Pereira, near Aveiro. So we have a lot of places that we have the Jewish remains.
So you have in the history the Jews fled from Spain. First of all, you had Jews that were living here.
Before those that came from Spain, they were here.
Yes. Then the Jews fled from Spain into Portugal. And shortly after, that was in 1492, and then later the Inquisition came to Portugal and Jews fled. But are you saying that, and there were Jews that stayed, and stayed from then for 500 years until now?
Hidden.
And not
Look,
just that Jews came back after
you have a chronology. The decree of the expulsion of the King of Manuel I, because the wedding. Do you have a saying that we say that from Spain you have nor good wind, neither good marriage. Not good wind because it's very dry and sometimes very cold. It's not a good wind. And not good marriage because the wedding between the Portuguese king and the prince of the Spanish that expelled the Jews. These Jews that came here in that time were Jews that were assimilated to the Jewish families that were lived here. Because even when the first kings of Portugal, in this region mainly, but other places, gave the shot to the cities, they established that anyone, Christian, that persecuted more or Jew could be punished. It's the case of Guarda, it's the case of Covilhã. Even the Jews are property of the king. The king treated the Jews as my Jews. And like in Guarda, they established the region or the place of the city where they must live and they must stay. In the Juderia, now it's Rua Hadash, it's the Rua Nova. The Rua Nova de Juderia. Even we have a place in Guarda that is the tribunal of the Judeus. What is the tribunal? It's the court of the Jews, the Bet Din. Or if it was the Bet Din, was a synagogue. And even we have the Foro del Rei inscription by order of the king, or a property of the king. The Foro means property of the king. So the Jews were property of the kings. I speak in the 12th century. In the 12th century. So you see, when sometimes we speak, the Jews in Portugal came from Spain after the expulsion. No, it's completely. The first minister of finance of the first king of Portugal was a Jew, Aya ben Chaya. The first minister of Portugal in 1143, when the first king, Afonso Henriques or Afonso I, got the independence of Portugal, the first minister of finance was a Jew. You see? So we had the expulsion in December 5. The king said the Jews must be converted in 8 months. After this, you could be slaves. But when he arrived, he established that during 20 years, no one could touch them about their religion. Why? Because the king expelled, but he didn't expel. He closed the ports, and he didn't give any vote, except to those that had money. But the majority stayed here, and the solution was the stand-up baptism. Because the king needed the money and one thing, the know-how. And as I told you, great part of the discoverings of the Portuguese were made by Bnei Anusim, and even before by Jews. Zarco, João Gonçalves Zarco, discovered Madeira. Abraham Zacut established the Almanac Perpetuum and invented the astrolabium. The astrolabium is an instrument for navigation that is still used now with techniques, but was invented in Portugal. It's a round one. If you go to the statue of Cabral here in Belmonte, the Alves Cabral, you can see it. But was invented here in the Almanac Perpetuum. Great part of these discoverings were made by the Bnei Anusim, a lot. One of the members of the king were from Guarda, and they were persecuted by the Inquisition because they worked on Sunday. We have 1,175 people officially killed alive in the Inquisition. The only crime was to be Jew, or apostasy Jew, or heresy and Jew. It is too much. You have a lot, 40,000 processes of the Inquisition. They are in the National Archive in Lisbon, Torre do Tombo. They are very well preserved, some of the great part of them. In my opinion, the Nazis learned everything with them. Because Inquisition knew what's the father, the mother, what the profession, where you're born, where you're from, etc. All the things. And even you have 5% of Jewish blood was enough to be accused or refusing the positions. We had a man that became governor in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, in Paraty. Miguel Teles da Costa was from Trancoso. Because it was not allowed to the Jews to reach positions in the state, but eluding, paying for sure. It was a very rich family. He came from the Diogo de Castro. Diogo Mendes de Castro was his father, And he became captain mayor of the king of Portugal, Peter II. And after he went to Brazil and was denounced as a Jew. So they arrested him, he lost everything, and he was condemned to the galleys of the king, who was condemned to the galleys, died. He died after being in Alto de Fé in 1711. Cases like this we have a lot. So the biggest synagogues we have, as I told you, were Portuguese. Amsterdam, Recife in Brazil, New York, Charity Israel, where they pray in Portuguese, the Tefillah is still in Portuguese, Curaçao, Suriname, they moved to the synagogue to Betat Futsot in Israel, Bucharest, Livorno, Safed, Salonika. So we have a lot of biggest places that the Portuguese. It was a mistake that the King John III, first Manuel, but after the Jews had to be converted, not be touched, etc. But the son of the King Manuel, John III, when he asked the Pope to have the Inquisition, was the big mistake. Portugal lost a lot, and never recuperated this. Because even we had a priest, a Jesuit priest, that defended the Anusim, the New Christians, was the Padre Antonio Vieira. That was very sorry because he saw the other places to grow with the know-how and the money of the Jews that came from Portugal to help to build other places and other nations like Holland or Italy or Turkey. You see? You see what Dona Gracia Mendes made there. Was a Portuguese from here, defended the New Christians, and the Sultan of Istanbul gave Tiberius to her. So we have other personalities that we lost with this decision of the Inquisition. Believe me, in my opinion, this is where me, Joseph, I never forgive them for Inquisition made to the Jewish people. And know why? They can apologize. They say, I was in the time in the history. No, because after this came on the Holocaust. After this came other things. And I cannot forgive, because in the fire of the Inquisition with the cross in front, they killed people that were innocent. They could be good doctors, scientists, workers of the land, agriculture, lives they killed. No one, they can ask to be forgiven, but I cannot forgive this. I can support, but I don't forgive. Because it's, no one must take or finish the life that Hashem gave us. And when it is, in my opinion, Inquisition made in that time, the Holocaust was a Shoah that he made in that time. Portugal had 1 million or 2 million inhabitants, 1 million something. And when they took these people to the fire in Évora, in Coimbra, in Lisbon, and we have the killing, 4,000 people were killed in 1506 in Lisbon, because when they were in celebration in the church of the San Domingo church, a light touched the cross, and they said, miracle, miracle, miracle. And the New Christian said, no, miracle, this is just a light. And they killed him, and after this, it was stopped, this killing, because the king came to Portugal, to Lisbon, was not there. But 4,000 people were killed, assaulted the Jewish quarters. And I cannot forgive this. Better, I cannot... It's not only to forgive, it's I cannot forget. Yes. The very easy thing is to say, I apologize. And the others? Where are they? No bones. You know, Garcia Dorta was one year in Castel de Vite and was a doctor in India, was a botanic, very, very important doctor. Do you know what Inquisition did to their bones? They took the bones from the sand and they burned in the fire because he was a Jew. And this is amazing. They said, it was in the time. In the the Holocaust, what is? Perhaps in the 2 centuries, the Holocaust, I forgive for the things that Holocaust or the Shoah made to the Jews. And we cannot forgive this. They'll say this because I used to say to the kids and to the people that we survived besides being killed. Who are the Persians or the Greeks or the Egyptians or the Romans or everywhere? But we are alive. We are alive, and I'm proud to be it. Am Israel Chai. Really. I put the very first plaque to signalize the Jewish quarter in Portugal. I spent 100 escudos, was the old money, to ask this plaque. No one touched it. Mm-hmm. No painted, nothing, no painting, nothing. It's there. Associação de Amizade Portugal-Israel, Jury of Guarda, with Magen David. It's there. And in the Jury of Guarda, I put the big Magen David in the square of the Jewish quarter. It's there. And I made the twin cities, Guarda and Sfat, Belmonte, Rospina, Afula, Celúrico da Beira, Radera, Tomar, and Ashdod with Figueira da Foz. I made the first congress in Guarda, historical one, the very first, where I joined historians, members of the communities, etc., in 1986. In 1988, I made perhaps the biggest congress, scientific congress about the Jewish life in the history in Troncoso. It was the very first time where we had Shabbat publicly in Portugal. I organized another congress in Gouveia, in Moncorvo, after in Castelo de Fides, Santarém, again in Troncoso. Even today, we created the museum, the Museum of Belmonte's composed by things of myself or my family. And the definition is what I did, where I created the small synagogue in Troncoso, Bet Maim Chaim, 4 years ago. We brought with the help of the municipality the Sefer Torah from Israel.
And how many Jews are there?
Very few too, very few. It's a Jewish center dedicated to Isaac Cardozo. I have other ideas that I want to develop. Look, I remember what my father told us, and my grandfather, were levies. And we have no land. So we must take care of our memory and of heritage. A person or a people that loses the roots is lost in all the world. And this is my obligation to preserve our faith. This is why always I say, Am Israel Chai. I don't stop.